Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how to do this beautiful pattern. This is really easy to do. One thing I'm going to give you a tip is get yourself a piece of paper. Get yourself a piece of paper so that you can write down the row sequence when you're doing it. When you work into the spaces, I've called this the space blanket, because you're going to be working into the spaces of the fan. You're going to be working into the spaces of the fan. It's up to you whether you start in space 1 or space 3. If you start on space 1, you put a number 1 down. It's better to put a number 1 down, because after space 1, your next row, you'll be doing space 2. Then you'll do space 3. Then you'll go back and do a space 2 in the next row. Then you'll do space 1, then space 2, then space 3. Every time you turn your row, you'll change it between space 1 and space 3. In between 1 and 3, you'll put a space 2 row. So you'll turn your blanket and go into space 3, then you'll do space 2 on the next row. The reason I write it down, I've been writing it down, is if you start, when you finish this blanket, finish in a space 2, and that'll keep your fan and the top of your blanket straight. If you start in a space 1 row, when you turn it to do the next row, you can't really tell whether you've been in row 1 or if you've been in row 3. So it's easier to write it down. So if you start in space 1 in your first row, you'll work into space 2 on your second row. Your third row, you'll be in space 3. Then you'll go back, the next row will be a space 2. Then the next row will be space 1, space 2, space 3, space 2, space 1, space 2. If you get my drift, in between each of these rows of space 1 or space 3, you'll do a space 2. And the reason I'm talking about the spaces, I'll pull this out a little bit so you can see where I've gone into the fan. So there I've done a space 2, a space 3, then the next row I did that fan in a space 2 again. And that's what gives this beautiful pattern. Look at that. Absolutely beautiful, just by moving that fan back and forth. Now, the edge here is sort of smooth. It looks like little fans, but when you do this blanket, I didn't finish this side deliberately so you could see it. Now, the yarn I've used is just a King Cole value double knitting in a peach. I didn't keep the label this time. I didn't finish the edge because I wanted to show you the difference. When you're crocheting, this is what your edge looks like as you're going up. Now, what I did to smooth it, or you can leave it like that if you want. If you want that nice bumpy edge, you can leave it like that. I'll show you in the video how I smoothed it off. It was really easy, just using some chains and a slip stitch. So that's why I haven't quite finished this blanket off down this one side. So I could show you the difference, what doing the 2 chain and slip stitch does, just straight down the side. Look at the difference. So it's up to you. If you want to leave it with that bumpy edge, then don't do what I show you for the edge. Just leave it like that. I've left the bottom the way it is, like this. This is a really pretty pattern, as you can see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish my edge off, and I'm going to show you how to make this a beautiful space blanket. So I'm going to show you how to do this pattern. It's really pretty, but like I said at the beginning, it's better to write it down as you're working with it so you know what row you finished on. So we're going to do a chain in sets of 4. Do any number of sets of 4 that you want, any number at all. So you can use any yarn for this and use the hook size it tells you on the label. I use a half size smaller because I crochet really slack. So if my label tells me to use a 4, I use a 3.5 because I crochet really slack, and that helps to keep my tension correct. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm only going to do a small sample to show you this stitch. The stitch itself is so easy. It's so easy. What you need to do is you write down the rows as you're working it. So the foundation row, you're going to go into the 4th stitch in your chain. Don't count the loop. That's a loop, it's not a stitch. These are your stitches here. 1, 2, 3 and 4. In to number 4, that chain there becomes your first stitch. So in to there we need 4 stitches in each cluster. So that's 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now if you're in the UK and Europe, these are treble crochets. If you're in the USA or another country, these will be double crochets for you. You're going to skip 3, 1, 2, 3, and build up cluster of 4 in the next stitch. So skip 1, 2 and 3. Now sometimes that cluster will squash that stitch. Make sure you pull your cluster back and count the first stitch. 1, 2, 3. So into the 4th stitch, you do that cluster. 1, 2, 3 and 4. Skip 3, 1, 2, 3 and do another one all the way along. So skip 3 and build a cluster of 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3 and 4, all into the same stitch. Skip 3, 1, 2, 3 and I've got 1 stitch left. Put 1 in here. Now it doesn't matter if you don't have 4 left. You can make an extra stitch with your tail or just pick your extra stitches out. Sometimes it's easy to lose your stitch count. 1 more is 4. And that's what you should have in a big long line. Now I'm going to get my piece of paper and my pen. So that's row 0. So that's row 0. You're going to turn your work. Now there's no chains involved in this. The way I've done this blanket, you get that nice little riggedy end up the sides. So what we're going to do is we're going to be working in the spaces. I'm going to slip stitch into that first space. Slip stitch in. So you're working in the space. We're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. That's your first stitch. We're going to put 3 more in. So we're going to do these clusters of 4. So that's 2 into the space, 3 into the space, 4. I'm going to put a number 1. So we've done row 0, that's our foundation row, and I'm doing stitch 1. So this is row, I'm using the first space, so I'll put that there. So I've got 4 there. I'm going to move straight over to the next cluster into the first space and I'm going to put 4. I'm going to do that all the way around. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Move over to the next cluster into the first space. I did say this stitch is easy. It's just when you put it down, so you can write it down so you can remember what row you've just done or what row you're on. So 4 into that first space, over to the next one, and put 1 cluster into the first space of the clusters that you've done already. 3 and 4. Now when I did my other blanket, I started in space 3, but you can start in space 1. It's up to you. It doesn't make any difference really. So what you're going to do now is you're going to just turn your work. Now, so we've done, I started in space 1. So the next one has got to be 2. It's got to be a number 2. This is to keep the pattern going left and right, left and right, left and right. So I'm going to slip stitch into the second stitch, then slip down into the middle space. So that's space 1, this is space 2. Slip stitch down into space 2. Oops. Down into space 2. That keeps your edge. When you do the slip stitch in the stitch, you get this nice little edge here as well. So chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then put your cluster in. So that's 4, 1, 2, that one's 3, and 4. So move to the middle. So that's space 1, you're going into space 2. On this row, you'll do a cluster in every middle space. That's space 2. Make sure you put 4 treble crochets in, and these are double crochets if you're in the USA. Move to the next one. Do that all the way along. So I'm at my last one, and I'm going to do my cluster in the middle, and that's space 2. Turn around, mark that off, then I'm going to write the number 3. The number 3, so we're going over to space 3 this time. So we're going to slip stitch across, and these slip stitches make a nice edge on your little peak. So that's 2, and I'm going to slip down into the space, and that gives a nice little edge to the side of your blanket. Now chain 3, 1, 2, 3. So you're just going to do the same thing, but into space 3. And that's why I've called this blanket the space blanket. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So over in to this space, space 3, and build your cluster. 1, 2, right through in the space, 3, and 4, and move over to the next one. So I'm at my last cluster, and I'm going to go in to space 3 and do my cluster. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then I'm going to turn around. Now I'm going to mark 3 off. Now we're going to go back to space 2 in between 1s and 3s. And as you can see with the pattern, you can tell when you've done a space 2, but you can't really, is that space 3 or was that space 1? Do you see what I mean? It was space 1, but that's why I'm writing it down, so that you can remember whether you've done space 3 or whether it was space 1. So now we're going to space 2. So we've written a space 2 there, so we're going to slip stitch across to space 2, and these slip stitches make a nice neat edge on your point. Now down into space 2, find right in the space and slip stitch, just pull through, chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and away we go again. And that is how you're going to do this pattern, this little space pattern. You're working in the spaces. So over to the next one and in to space 2. Work one cluster into space 2 of all the other ones, and make sure you do 4 stitches. These are treble crochets if you're in the UK, and they're double crochets if you're in the USA or another country. So I've done that row. I'm going to turn my work around. You don't need to do no chains or anything, just turn it around, score that off. Now I've done 3 and 2, now we're going to do space 1. So we're just going to slip stitch down into space 1 again and do a chain of 3, 1, 2, 3, and again I've done a slip stitch down because it gives a nice little part of the pattern. It doesn't leave a big hole there. So 3 more into there, 1, 2, because my chain of 3 is my first stitch. Now you can use any yarn for this, any yarn at all. The one I'm using is a double knitting, and that's a weight 3 in the USA. Now you can see how it goes up to here and then it starts to go across. It's going to start going over and back and over and back, just like that finished one that I've showed you. So into space 1, not the stitch, you're going right in the space. And put your 4 stitches in. So I'm going in to my last one on the space 1 row. Now you can use any yarn for this. It's beautiful done in a variegated yarn. And you can do it in chunky as well. Just use the hook size it tells you on the label. And that's how pretty this is. It's a really nice texture, and you get this nice bumpy little edge all the way up. So I'm going to turn. So I've done the ones in space 1, so we'll score that out. Now you've got to do space 2 again. So in between spaces 1 and 3, you'll always do a space 2. So slip stitch over to space 2 and go in to the middle space. That's space 2 in the middle. There's 3 spaces. There's 1 space, that space, and that space. So if you've got a fan of 5, you can use space 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then you can just flip it and do 4, 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 4, 3, 2, 1. That would split it up even more. So 1, 2, 3. So into the middle. 2, So I've got the chain is 1, 2, 3 and 4 and over and to space 2, and that's what you'll continue to do with this space blanket. You're using the spaces. And you're going to put 4, 1, 2, oops, that's 5. And you're going to put 4 of your bow stitches into each cluster. And that's what you'll do with this blanket. And that way it'll go back and forward, back and forward, back and forward. So once I've done space 2, my next row will be space 3. I'll be using space 3. And then I'll go back to using space 2, then space 1, then space 2, then space 3. I'll work my way along the spaces and back again. And that takes your pattern up in this really pretty weave like this. And you can use any yarn you want. The stitch count is 4 and use as many as you want. Make that chain as wide as you want it to be. Now this side I haven't done, so you can either leave it like this if you like it, or what I've done, I've kind of evened it off a little bit on this side, and I'll show you how I did that. I've left the top just with the fan, and I've left the bottom straight like this. So if you don't want the edge as wriggly as this, I've neatened it off a little bit, as you can see, like this. It's still got that little wriggle, almost like a little fan shape down the side. So it's up to you. So I'm going to show you how I did this. I'm going to attach my yarn. I did one side first and then I'll do the second side. So I'm going to attach my yarn into the corner. And I just done one side at a time, because I'm going to keep the fan on the top and the straight bottom. I'm going to do one chain just to hold that in. I'll zoom in a little bit, and you might notice I don't have my polish on. Some of my red polish was all coming off down the bottom as my nail was growing, so I've just had to take it off and I'll get them done again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do chains in between the spaces here. So I'm going to chain 2, just 2. I'll sew that tail end in, and I'm going to slip stitch into this point. Just do a slip stitch. I'm going to chain 2, and I'm going to slip stitch down here. And as you can see, look at that, just a simple chain is just making that like a little sort of fan. So chain 2, and I'm going to slip stitch into this point and through that stitch there. Slip, chain 2, and go to the next one. And I'm going to do that all the way down in each row. And look at the difference it's doing. Just doing that 2 chain. If you want your edge a little bit straighter, then that's what you can do. So chain 2, slip down to the next row, slip stitch, chain 2, slip stitch in to this corner here, chain 2, I'm going to slip in, I'm going in between the stitches again, chain 2, and slip into the corner of this one. And what it's doing, it's taking that deep edge away. You'll still have this nice ruffled edge. If you want to leave it like that, you can leave it like that if you want. So chain 2 and slip stitch down into the next row below. I'm just going row for row. Chain 2 and slip stitch through that one, just through the space. Chain 2 and slip. And so it's neatened off that edge a bit, but if you look, at the difference on the edge, doing that chain or leaving it like that. It neatens up the edge a little bit. So you can do it either way. You can keep that little funky edge like that, or you can do that chain 2 and slip stitch. Chain 2 each row. You can see where the rows are. As long as you slip stitch into each row, that chain will soften that edge up. This is a really pretty stitch. So thank you very much for watching. If you want to support the channel, then click on the link underneath the video for my Ko-fi page. I put up some pictures there. I put up a few posts up there as well. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, then please subscribe to the channel. It's completely free. Just click on that subscribe button. Help me get up to 300,000 subscribers so that YouTube will show my videos a little bit more often. And if you click on the bell icon, YouTube will tell you when I put up another tutorial. So until the next time, happy crafting, and I'll see you all again soon. Goodbye.